In MESBG, mounts are very handy things. They allow models to move faster, often hit harder, but you can't always get your hands on the mounts that you want. Whether there's stocking issues, or perhaps they haven't even made the model itself. Whatever the reason might be, there's plenty of opportunity for kit bashers to make their own mounted models. Over the years, I've made around 60 of these things. Some of them look quite dated, some of them look like they've held up over time. So I thought this could be a good way to explore my hobby journey, take a look at some of the very earliest conversions that I ever made, all the way up to my more recent stuff. You can see how I've progressed. I can let you know what I would do differently, and you might pick up a few ideas for your army along the way. So let's get into it. I'm Joe from Windrush Wargamers. Here are the good, the bad and the ugly of my mounted Middle-earth conversions. Do be sure to subscribe down below, we've got loads of content you might find helpful. Let's start off with a real cracker. Here's the Plastic Fellowship converted to be mounted. These are one of the first sets of conversions I did when I first got back into the hobby at around 2016-ish. I made them because at the time, the metal sculpts of the Fellowship on horseback were not available on the store, so I made do myself. During my time away, Games Workshop had released a plastic set of the Fellowship. I'd collected the Battle Games in Middle-earth magazine, so I had all the metal sculpts, so I wasn't really thrilled with them, but I did see a use for them. Taking the 4 man-size models, I converted them into being mounted. For this, I used the Riders of Rohan box. Most of the work was simply sawing them in half and sticking them to the Rider of Rohan legs. But of course, I did have to sculpt the cloaks. This was so the Riders of Rohan legs would fit better with the Fellowship. For the Legolas, all I did was reposition his head so he looks like he's actually looking the way he's shooting for a change. The Boromir one, if you notice, is broken, so I replaced his hand recently with an unpainted Perry Miniatures one. I'll have to go back in and fix that eventually. I like the pose though. The horse has got his head down like he's charging into battle, and Boromir looks like he's going to give some a backhanded slash. For Aragorn, I changed him to a one-handed grip on his sword, and I sliced diagonally, keeping as much as his overcoat as possible. This meant that I had much less work to do. It just took a bit of dodgy green stuff sculpting for Gandalf the Grey to look right at home on top of his Rider of the Rohan legs. These have seen quite a lot of action on my tabletop, and I'm actually quite pleased with them. From a distance, they still hold up. I will probably go in and update the paint job and the basing especially, but I'm actually quite proud of what I did here. Shortly after making the Fellowship mounted, I took a stab at making some mounted Citadel Guard. Now, Games Workshop have never made models for mounted Citadel Guard, so I really wanted to test myself here. These were kit bashed from Warriors of Minas Tirith and the Knights of Minas Tirith range. The only thing I really did was sculpt the capes using green stuff, and to be honest, if I was going to do this again, I would definitely change the capes. I'd probably use some pre-existing plastic ones. There's some kits from Fireforge Games with some flowing cavalry capes, so I'd probably add those to the mix. Another thing I'd definitely update is the painting and the basing. One day I will get around to repainting and basing my entire Minas Tirith army, and when I do, these lads will get the update that they deserve. Keeping with the Gondor theme, around the same time I made Furlong the Fat mounted. Just like the Citadel Guard, despite being able to take a horse, there's never been a model made for Furlong the Fat on a horse. Most people, I think, when they get a Furlong the Fat miniature, they either buy 2 and cut him in half and then mount him, or they pick up some of the many good proxies and 3D prints for Furlong the Fat mounted. I decided to kit bash him in a really crazy way. He has a horse from the Minas Tirith Knights set. His head is a Dwarf Ranger head. His torso is from the Minas Tirith Knights set again. The horn is from the Minas Tirith Captain set. His legs are Rohan Rider legs, I think. He's just a massive hodgepodge. To top it off, I plastered him in some very suspect chainmail, but that was pretty much all I could achieve at that time. I made a very dated video for this a long time ago, which you can see in the cards above, which kind of outlines the process from start to finish. I would do it very differently now though. I'd probably use the Knights of Dol Amroth as a base. as that would do a lot of the work for me in terms of how I would want the horse to look. But I think he definitely fits for the bill and looks okay from an arm's length, so I won't be changing him anytime soon. Next up, I have some Warg Marauders. These are part of my pretty big Morya Army, which I've never quite finished. I'd put these in the ugly category because these guys are rough. They're not actually really finished if you look at them. I haven't painted the base rim, haven't really based them properly. And to top it off, the paint scheme looks about half finished. There's no real highlight, but I think they're serviceable. This was nowhere near my idea. I stole this from someone online. The goblins, as you can tell, are pretty bow-legged. So all you need to do is cut the slaughter tabs off and glue them to the back of the warg. I had plenty of both, of plastic wargs and plastic goblins, because I collected the magazines. If I was going to do this project again, I'd probably finish them for a start, but also I wouldn't be so stingy with the goblins. I'd probably give them 3 goblins like the models are supposed to have. But that being said, I think they're a good base to work up from. The next set of conversions marks a landmark. Firstly, they're one of the few conversions I'm actually pretty proud of and I wouldn't really change anything on, but also they're conversions that I started to introduce other miniature lines into the Middle-earth range. These are my Riders of the Dead. I made these originally because the Riders of the Dead, not only are they a little bit pricey, but also they weren't available at the time. So I bought this box of Living Dead Knights from the Fireforge Games range. You get 6 miniatures for around €20, which is really cheap. Now you could just equip them with sword and board and just call it a day, but I decided to saw some Warriors of the Dead in half and put them on top. The kit is really good for this because the riders come with 2 legs glued together and no torso. That means that as soon as you saw a miniature in half, you can just place it straight on top. To make it even easier, I mostly used miniatures that didn't have a cape at all, so I didn't have to sculpt that into the legs later on, using these poses in particular. I love this project, it was so cool to make, and I wouldn't change much, maybe just blend between the kits a little better, but on the whole, really happy with how these turned out. These next conversions are all around the sort of 2020 to 2021 era, the kind of COVID era. Here are some of my Mahood Camel Riders. At this point, the Mahood Raiders hadn't been around for, I want to say, over 5 or 6 years. It was becoming incredibly difficult to buy them online. You'd have to spend hundreds of pounds for even one. So I decided to make my own. I used the Perry Miniatures Mounted MESBG from the Sudanese range. Converted them up using lances and green stuff tusks on the side to represent the Impaler special rule. Really like how these guys turned out, and now I've got some camels from Games Workshop. Now they've restocked them, so I'll have a massive force available with some really unique poses. Around this time I also picked up a set of the Galathrum Knights so I could make some Mirkwood Cav, as this would be a lot cheaper. All I did was ensure that I used the sword arms as opposed to the bow, and I replaced the heads with Mirkwood Elf heads, and I press molded some Mirkwood Elf shields. As you can see, I've never finished these. There's quite a lot of the painting still to do. I've just got a couple of base layers done, but I think these are the starts of what could be quite a nice set of conversions actually. The next conversion I did at around this sort of time was my mounted Greamer Wormtongue. This was not a model to save money, this was simply because they've never made a Greamer Wormtongue mounted. When the most recent Saruman and Greamer box set dropped in their lovely plastic sculpts, I decided to keep the metal one as my foot version, and I decided to convert a mounted Greamer, using again a rider of Rohan as the base. I had Greamer cut in half, glued them together, and then moulding the 2 sculpts together using green stuff. His legs might be a wee bit stumpy, but that could just be the pose. But on the whole, I really like this guy. He's mounted on black obsidian to make it look like the inside of the Tower of Orthanc. And yeah, really like how this guy turned out. Next up, I made a whole bunch of Warg Riders for my Angmar army, but you could probably use these for any evil army, like Isengard or Mordor. They all have throwing spear and shield. The spears are from some historical sprue or another, and the shields are press molded from the Morgul Knights kit. The legs are just the legs of the normal Warg Riders. They're all magnetized as well to allow them to be removed from the Warg, and the Warg stays on the field if they pass the courage test. They all have corresponding dismounts, they can match up exactly. Yeah, quite like these, quite neat work actually. From one magnetized project to another now, this is Radagast the Brown on horse. As far as I'm aware, this model has never been released, and I really wanted one for my Radagast Alliance army. So I simply put a magnet underneath his torso so I could remove him from his foot version, and I could magnetize him to, I believe the legs are actually Morgul Knight legs. The horse is a Perry Miniatures horse just because I had one lying around. There's no reason why you couldn't use one from the Middle Earth range. Particularly, I think the Rohan horses would match quite well. Next up, I have the Morgul Knights. So as you can see, most of these are standard, but I did kit bash some with the Perry Knight sprue from the, I believe this is the Argencourt range. This is much more clearly detailed in my Black Númenórean army conversion video, so check that out in the cards above. Along with these, I did make a Black Númenórean captain using the Dark Marshal. All I did was fill in his face with a visor, and the mounted ones have a lance. Next up is my Goat Rider conversion. So these again are magnetized at the waist, so I can switch between Champions of Erebor and my Goat Riders. They're technically not goats, they're actually rams, which are male sheep. They're from the Rambuck Raiders kit, and they took a fair bit of conversion. They're quite convenient, save a lot of time. I like the bases, they're based on green marble. Really happy with how these guys turned out. Check out the video linked above to see the process in more detail if you haven't already caught that video. These next two I did with my brother. They are Gil-galad mounted and a Númenórean captain. Gil-galad is based on the Elrond, the newer Elrond plastic with some Gil-galad bits. And the Númenórean captain is a kind of hodgepodge of Perry and Middle-earth bits. The process is detailed in two 1-minute shorts videos, so they should be linked above, so if you want to check them out. Camel conversion. I really liked the horned camel, the Easterling from the Hobbit films, and so I wanted to kind of emulate that for a new force I'm working on. Having multiple Witch King sculpts really helped, so I used him as a kind of base. Removed the cowl, and I used the hooded cowl from the newer Witch King sculpt. As that was going spare, as I used the helmet on him. From there I used the helmet of an Easterling, and was sure to allow for lots of negative space beneath the cowl, so it looks like there's obviously nothing but hood beneath it. The horns are actually from a little goat skull in the Goblin Town kit. May make some more ring wraiths along the same kind of lines, just kind of kit bashing them. You know, the kind of special ring wraiths that I don't have. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see that. And that is pretty much it. That takes us to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. With all of the extra different poses, there's over 60 mounted conversions I've made. Let me know if you liked any. Tell me in the comment section below. Let me know if there's any unfinished or really old conversions that might need a rescue or an update. Let me know if you want to see that in a video in the future. Also, please do let me know if you'd want to see more of my conversions like this, maybe the heroes I've made or all of the different kinds of troop conversions I've made. So like I always say, like the video if you liked it, give it a dislike if you disliked it. We have a free Discord if you'd like to join. Really cool hobbyists in there. We're really egging each other on to progress as hobbyists, and really nice environment. The guys there are really cool. So check out the link below if you're interested. I've been Joe from Windrush Wargamers. Thanks very much, and I will catch you in the next one.